What is abstraction? Welcome to part 2 of Hegel for Non-Philosophers. In this section, I want to talk about an essay written by Hegel in 1807 called Who Thinks Abstractly? Hegel wrote this for a general audience, so it's actually one of Hegel's clearest essays, and I think it's one of the most accessible introductions. You can find the essay on Marxists.org for free, and the first couple paragraphs can drag a little bit, but once you get to the meat of it, I think it's really easy to understand. So who thinks abstractly, according to Hegel? Who is it that thinks in an abstract way? Well, according to Hegel, it's the uneducated. Uneducated people think abstractly. Educated people have more sense. So then, we might ask, what does it mean to think abstractly? What is abstraction for Hegel? Well, Hegel gives an example. There's a person who unalives somebody, and this criminal is being led to the gallows. And as this, person who committed this horrific crime is being walked up to their end, there are some ladies standing around, and the ladies are looking at this criminal and going, good looking dude. And then the criminal's kind of suave about it, and so the ladies are thinking like, wow, he's a real Luigi kind of fellow. And so there's some people standing around and see these ladies checking out this criminal, and they're shocked by this. They're like, how can you say he's good looking? Don't you know what he did? Don't you know he's a unaliver? And even the priest is shocked by this. He's like, clearly there's something wrong with our society. People are glorifying people who commit such acts. So these people condemning the ladies for pointing out this murderer is kind of good looking, and the priest who thinks that this means that there's something wrong with the society, those people, according to Hegel, are thinking abstractly. For them, that criminal is not a real person. They are the abstraction of a criminal. And from this abstract point of view, criminals who commit such horrific crimes cannot be good-looking. Similarly, let's say there's a journalist who wants to write a story about what caused this person to commit this action. And they look at this person's story, and they find out that they grew up in an abusive household. They find out that they got kicked out by their parents for some minor offense and had to live their life as a life of crime to make themselves be able to survive. The person writes this, and they're attacked. The public is outraged by this. You're trying to defend what this person did. And again, the public is not looking at the real person, the real criminal. They're looking at an abstraction of a criminal. Because real criminals are products of their circumstances. All people are products of their circumstances. All people have a history. All people have lives that are not perfectly categorizable in terms of good or bad, right? Perhaps this person, before they did this horrific act, perhaps they helped their neighbor with their garbage. Perhaps they were kind to children. Perhaps they helped the old lady cross the street. And all of these things would seem to be inconsistent with this picture of them being just a unaliver and nothing more. And so abstraction reduces everything to a single category. Now the word abstract comes from the Latin abstractere, which means to pull away, to draw out. And so when we abstract, we isolate a feature of something and draw that out as a general categorization. So something like the term human being is an abstraction, right? Because we're all different from each other. Every person is an individual that's different from the others, but we all share something in common, namely our being a human being. And so with that category, with that abstraction, we draw out that particular aspect that we share in common and place all of us underneath this category. These people, they take the crime that this person committed, they draw it out and they say, you're a criminal, you're an unaliver. And they take everything about this person becomes part of that story, and part of that that concept of being a criminal, of being an unaliver, and everything that doesn't fit gets ignored, gets pushed aside, is negated, because it doesn't fit into that categorization that they're attempting to reduce this person to. They think about things in terms of simple categories, in terms of an either and or. And, if somebody is a bad person, they're just a bad person, don't have anything good about them, and they're very black and white in their thinking, because they think abstractly, because they reduce everything to these neat categories. Hegel gives another interesting example of a young woman and an old woman at the marketplace. The young woman buys some eggs, and she finds out that they're rotten, so she turns to the old woman and says, "You sold me rotten eggs. Your eggs are rotten." And she's like, "What, you think my eggs are rotten? You think my eggs are rotten? You're rotten." your dad's a bum, your mom's an HO, and look at you. Look at what you're dressed, you know? She starts S-shaming this woman, and then, you know, insinuates that, you know, it's French officers buying all these things for her. And so Hegel says this is abstraction because none of these things had anything to do with the rotten eggs. So she thinks abstractly. She just thinks, you call my eggs rotten, and now everything she can pull about this person becomes part of this argument of why this person is awful for calling her eggs awful, right? Like, including her stockings, her clothes, her scarf, her mom, her dad, her whole family, right? Is all subsumed under this abstraction of rotten eggs, or you call my eggs rotten. And Hegel makes a joke here. He says, well, I mean, you say this about the officers. Well, clearly the officers thought there was more to this woman than her calling your eggs rotten. And so abstract thinking not only draws something out while ignoring everything else, it can also color everything by virtue of an abstraction. We say, oh, this person said this one thing I disagree with. So now everything they say and everything they think and everything about them is just going to fit into the abstraction I've made of them. Yet Hegel also describes how abstraction can be a social relationship. It can also be a way that we treat each other. We can treat each other as abstractions of people rather than as real people. And here Hegel gives this example of a servant who has a master who's not too bright, right? And he says the worst thing a servant can have is a master who is not as smart as them. Because then you have to take orders from a person who's not very bright. When I teach this to my students, I always say, you ever had to work a job for a boss who you were smarter than? It's the worst. If you have to listen to a not very bright person tell you what to do. These masters who don't think very brightly, Hegel says, often treat their servants not as human beings, but as the abstraction of a person. They don't want to hear their opinions. They don't want to have a conversation with them. They don't want to get to know them. It's like Lucille Bluth never wants to make eye contact with a waiter, right? Because that waiter is an abstraction of a waiter, not a real person. And Hegel seems to be under the impression, I think from some French literature, he read that the French treat their servants like human beings and want to hear their opinion and like their friends and buddies, and I don't know if that's true. This is some of the stuff that informs his later master-slave dialectic, which y'all might have heard of. But it also comes from his own experience working as a private tutor, where he had to work for this old reactionary and, you know, who was constantly ranting about the French Revolution. And so abstract thinking is that way of reducing everything down to one thing. At the same time, and we'll see more of this as we get into Hegel's dialectical method, abstraction is necessary. People who think abstractly are uneducated because they can't move beyond abstraction. But we have to start by abstracting, by generalizing, by coming up with general terms and general concepts so that we can then work out our basic terms and our basic theories, and then move to the concrete, then move to the contradictions, then move to the messiness of the reality. So you think about Einstein. Einstein didn't look at the speed of light as it really exists, right? The speed of light in this, the light in this room is not moving at the speed of light because it's, you know, it had to go through the bulb and now it's moving through the air, right? He worked at the speed of light in a vacuum. He abstracted all of these other factors to just focus on light so he could find out how the speed of light behaved in those vacuum circumstances, in those abstract circumstances. But once he did that, he then had to build a more concrete analysis by introducing more parts, and then to actually learn anything from the science, you have to take that abstract law and factor it back into the concrete and look at all the differences and look at all the way things change. Marx, too, starts with abstraction. So Marx uses abstraction to begin with very simple categories. But these simple categories become more concrete and more complex, and so we have to learn to think about them in the real world. While we have to start with the abstract, pure version of these categories, they might become more muddy once we try to apply them in the real world, just like Einstein's theories become more complicated once we have to actually do something with them. So while, in a way, all thinking begins with abstraction, begins by isolating things and trying to work out what they are and how to define them, thinking only begins here. And the uneducated never move beyond that. They just say, you're a good person, you're a bad person, that's right, that's wrong, and never look at the whole picture or try to move beyond these simple categorizations of things as one or the other, as black or white, as good or bad, and think in this one-sided fashion. And as we'll learn, dialectical thinking is about thinking about things from many different sides. It's many-sided thinking. It's not the one-sided either-or way of thinking. So we'll talk more about dialectics and how it works and its history in the next installment of Hegel for Non-Philosophers. But I hope this has been helpful and interesting and helps you with your own journey in understanding theory.